Hello, really welcome to MHTV tonight. And we've got some fantastic guests today. And we're going to be talking about Black Lives Matter. We're going to be talking about lots and lots of issues that affect health and well-being and students' lives. So we'll start off by introducing everyone. Obviously, I'm Nicky. Can I introduce my lovely colleague, Vanessa?
Hello, everyone. It's Vanessa Garrity. Tonight, looking forward to this evening. Tonight, I'll be quieter than usual because we've got quite a big panel. So I'll be covering the social media. So we'd love you to ask questions and join in the discussion generally. Nothing's off the table, really. If you want to join in, you can either join in on Facebook by liking the Unite MHNA page and commenting there, or you can join in on Twitter by following MHTV hashtag and posting your questions there for us.
Yeah, and we're very lucky. I'll go around the group. They don't know which order I can see them in, so it's going to be a surprise for them. But I will start with Bertha. Can you introduce yourself and let us know what you've been up to?
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Bertha Matunge, and I work as lead nurse for quality and practice at Siren Borders Partnership Trust. I've been a mental health nurse for 14 years now, and prior to that, I was a teacher for 10 years. I also am part of the Dennis group at the RCN, and the group was formed and named after Sharon Dennis, who was first BME mental health nursing director. And the group is made up of mental health nurses from the RCN, also people with lived experience of mental health services. And we look at how we can kind of ensure that there's equality and inclusion in mental health policy, research, and mental health leadership. And my passion is around practice development, inclusion, and especially BME leadership inclusion. Yeah,
that's fantastic. And don't forget to pile in with questions, everybody. So we'll go to Shanaz.
Hi, I'm Shanaz Pottinger. I'm a psychology graduate, and I recently finished my master's in human factors for inclusive design. For those of you who don't know, human factors is about creating kind of optimal processes and systems, as well as products for people. I currently support the nursing digital curriculum at the University of Nottingham, where I'm also a staff sponsor for our student BME network. And I'm part of our working group in the School of Health Sciences looking at decolonising the curriculum, which is really about taking a sort of educational change approach to inclusivity and inclusive curriculum design.
Fantastic. We're so lucky. And Yannick, last but not least, obviously.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yannick Yalipende, and I am currently an applied neuropsychology master's student. I'm also a psychology graduate. Aside from that, I'm also a HCA at a hospital in Bristol, a mental health hospital in Bristol, and also the founder and director of Black People Talk, which is an initiative that aims to support the mental health and well-being of the Black community through psychoeducational and therapeutic peer support groups. So currently, we're offering more of the academic chapter of the initiative. So we're at universities. We're at 2 universities currently, and currently in discussion with 3 others, and we are approaching the end of the session. So for this particular academic year, we're at the end of our sessions, and we're really excited about having further sessions next academic year.
Fantastic, fantastic. So one of the reasons we first started thinking that this would be a really good idea was thinking about the way society and culture is at the moment, and the fact that we're lucky enough to be in a situation where people are talking about issues which have been painful for forever. And we're finally getting to a stage where we're actually talking about the experience of people who are white, the experience of people who have diversity, who are people of colour, and we're finally actually getting to a place where that's coming into all the different agendas. So we'll be looking at student experience, but we'll also be looking at nursing experience, because we've had situations where students have been misinformed maybe about their rights and the expectations for them and for their humanity and their human choices. So one of the things I'd like to just ask around at the panel to begin with, just to kick us off, and nothing's out of bounds, so please feel free to ask us anything. If we can answer you, we absolutely will. Some nursing students felt that they were discouraged from going on Black Lives Matter marches for this idea that it would be too political. And I think maybe I'd like to come to Bertha first on that, to say, as a leader in nursing background, what would you say if a student was concerned about an issue like that?
Hey, thank you, Nicky. I think with the protest like Black Lives Matter, it's addressing social injustice. And as a nurse who's compassionate and caring, addressing social justice is definitely something that I would encourage, and be nothing that says that you cannot go on such a march like Black Lives Matter. But what I would definitely say as a piece of advice is that while you are on the march, ensure that you are remaining on the right side of the law, because then if you go on the wrong side of the law and you do get arrested for breaking the law, then that can affect not just your nursing student, but your professional career as well. So there is definitely nothing wrong with joining in. And there are different ways of joining in as well. I think, Shanaz, you can come in and kind of share some of the ways that they can join in if they don't want to kind of physically go and maybe be worried that they might get caught up in something that is illegal.
Definitely. Yeah. So, I mean, as a student, while you're still attached to the university, you can become what we would call a student acting as an agent of change. So you can get involved either with your network, so the BME networks, or the cultural networks, engage with people like me who are in the university working on inclusivity projects. We're very much perspective taking. We very much want the student perspective. We want you to work on projects with us that will also give you excellent opportunities to evidence your leadership, which can help you in terms of promotion and how you progress when you leave academia. But also from a personal perspective, I'm going to pursue a professional doctorate. Yannick also has hopes of pursuing a professional doctorate. And so for us, we weigh up whether we participate in demonstrations and things like that against kind of any risk that we may see to our professionalism and where we're most effective. Sometimes we may make the decision that actually we think there's too much risk in going to that particular thing. We're more effective in our meetings with people either like Bertha in the NHS, our supervisors. For me, feeding into equality and diversity committees at the university, working with those sorts of groups. So it's a choice that you definitely have to kind of think about and weigh up. Just because you don't go to a protest doesn't mean that you're not fighting for social injustice. There's many methods. And equally, if you choose to go to a protest, which is a great thing, I think it was President Obama recently said that we need both. We need people to advocate in the halls of power, and we need that social presence as well. So by all means, get involved in any conversations that you think are interesting and that you'll be effective in. But yes, always keep your mind on your passion and your vocation, and that you don't want that to come into question.
Yannick, did you want to add anything? You don't have to, it's not the law. I think you've muted yourself.
Yes, I think Bertha and Shanaz definitely covered this extensively. Yeah, they have everything covered. I think I would agree with both sides. I think it's I personally would want to go to that protest. I understand that there is an element of volatility there, that you never know what happens, as Shanaz mentioned earlier on. You never know what happens, and so there are many ways that you can do things while being safe. Stepping out into those type of situations is inadvertently a gamble. I think if anything were to happen, and cases aren't necessarily always taken individually, it now becomes a crowd control situation, and you could easily find yourself caught up in something. So there's also that to consider. Probably it'll be good to look. I think there was a website, I've completely forgotten what it actually is now, but there are some tips in terms of when you show up to those types of situations, where you position yourself, things to look out for, situations to avoid in that particular case. So I would if I personally were to go into those situations, I would definitely look out for that and plan the entire process as much as I can. I mean, obviously you can't plan the entire thing because there are very many variables involved, but yeah, I would basically do that.
Yeah. So what the NMC say, what your NMC Code of Conduct says, is that you shouldn't bring the profession into disrepute, but being somebody who advocates for social justice is your job. So however you choose to do that, if you do that through organising, through committees, through giving other people opportunities to speak, through going on marches, find your own niche, exactly as Shanaz was saying, everyone finds their own way, but don't feel that you can't say what's in your heart, because that's not, nursing is not about putting a gag on you. It's about helping you to be the person that you want to be. The opportunities are there for you. If you want to be an advocate, then you have to learn how to speak up. And sometimes you need to get out there, and sometimes you need to be strategic. You can do both. You don't have to do one thing or the other. But I would really, I went to a university that was very much about nursing being like, being a good girl. We can see how that turned out. But, you are neutral, you are passive, you are professional. And that's not what professional means. No other professional group behaves that way, or the way that people suggest nurses should. I wondered if Vanessa wanted to come in on this at all.
No, I just really agree. I think it's a really important point what's been made about, not needing to go out and protest to kind of protest against social justice. I think you can be an introvert and still, fight against social justice. And equally, you can be out there, directly. I think, each to their own. But I think, like's been said, as long as everybody's contributing. Social media is obviously a marvellous vehicle now, isn't it, for getting your message across. And having quite a significant reach. And I think, like Nicky says, I was brought up in an era in mental health nursing of not protesting against things, but I've always, believed that mental health nursing is linked to social justice, inextricably linked to it, really. And I don't think we can advocate for people if we're not out there kind of speaking out and speaking up for other people as well. I think that's part of our job. It's part of our job as individuals, and it's part of our job to speak up for people who don't have voices as well. So, as well as obviously on a population level. So, yeah.
I think the other thing that Yannick said was really valuable as well was this idea that do it smart, check out your website. See, if you've never been on a march, my main piece of advice, you go for a wee first. I know I sound like everyone's grandma right now, but if you're going to be stood around and you're going to get kettled, which is where you get kept in one area, make sure you've gone, because particularly in COVID times, there's no shops open. You can't just nip out. So just be aware of actually what you're signing up to. And don't forget as well, you have stewards on marches. So you have people that you can ask for help if you're in trouble. And you'll also have somebody who is disability access. So if you have mental health issues and you want to protest or you want to raise your voice, then contact the march organizer and make sure that you are in an area where you have space. So maybe if you're concerned about being in a crowd, or you have physical issues that mean you need to have a bit more space, those things should be provided for now. So make sure you ask for those things and you can have them. All right. So the other thing we were going to talk about is the experience of students in practice and at universities. So maybe we start by going back to universities. So the experience of students of colour, particularly in universities. So obviously Shanaz and Yannick have been students very recently. I won't say that we haven't, everyone else, but perhaps it's something that you could talk to us about your experience and about how important it is to have spaces for people to share their experience.
Yannick, do you want to go first, or should I?
I think you should, if you don't mind.
So I've been to two different universities. One for my bachelor's, one for my master's. When I was doing my bachelor's, I was in an environment where I experienced racism, sometimes overt, at university, and also, in the city as well, where we were studying as well. I do have to make the point that I'm fortunate enough, because this might not be all student experiences, I didn't experience a sense of the organisation being racist, or any of my professors or academics giving me those sorts of vibes. It was more that you can't control what students from many different backgrounds bring to university with them in terms of their values and their ideals. And I'm going to be honest, to quote some of the things I had. My parents are divorced. I had people ask me if I knew my dad, because they knew that my dad was black. I've had people ask me how I can afford to live in a certain area, I have overheard jokes like what's black at the bottom and white at the top society. You know, these were all really upsetting things because I'm from Birmingham originally, so I grew up in a city where I'm not saying there's no racism, but it's a very multicultural city. I hadn't experienced much before I come to university. I also studied as a mature student as well, so on some level I feel quite lucky that I had perhaps a stronger sense of self than I may have if I'd have gone at 18, and a little bit more resilience to that. But then the downside was also because I was a little bit older, I was not going to entertain fake friendships or entertain people sort of around me that weren't for me. And so I did find my undergraduate experience, although I had a lot of academic success and you know, I had great professors who nurtured me and things like that. My social experience was very isolating and lonely. And I kind of felt when I passed out and I left to go and do my master's, I made certain choices around where I would do that based on really a need to kind of heal, to not walk out of the door every day and be reminded that my skin was brown, because that wasn't how I grew up, you know. And so it does happen, students. There are people like me at universities who are trying to break down those barriers. If you have overt instances and you can trace it, report the person as well. There are rules, there are policies, you know. If it happens in a more social endeavor, like, you know, it's harder to trace, then, you know, keep your eye on the prize and do call it out if you have the confidence, if you feel that you can. I feel like a common question that we have, yesterday I was actually in a meeting with Black women in academia, lots of people who were senior academics who had really paved the way, to be honest, for me. And they were saying similar sorts of things. And even those questions were coming up against people who were in the teaching position, was like, how do I call it out? And what I would say is your instincts know. You know when someone is being biased towards you on this basis. Don't question yourself. Go with your instincts and talk to someone about it. That's the main thing. Even if it's not to get someone in trouble with an action orientation, talk to someone for you, so you feel better, so you feel less isolated. That's a good segue for Yannick, because his intervention's all about talking. So do you want to talk about your experiences and how you got there?
Yeah, thank you. Shanaz definitely covered that beautifully. That's a beautiful rendition of your experience. I think it's a great thing to have Shanaz and I on board in terms of to discuss this, because we obviously come from relatively different paths in life and different experiences. So whereas some of my experience echoes what Shanaz mentioned, you know, being a mature student, going into university, I guess mine was a little more traumatic. I think it's first of all, I transferred into my second year, and prior to that, I was in London at Birkbeck, which is like an evening university where it's like pretty much the majority of the students are mature. So like the oldest person in my class was a lady, and she was 70 years old, and then the youngest person was 23. So it was a very different. And we were all from different paths or walks of life, and we were all different in a way. So I guess the fact that we were all just different, the bonding element was our differences, and they were almost celebrated. But then when I came into University of Bristol, I walked into a very homogenous class. It was somewhat of an alien environment. Obviously, I came into my second year, and so I had to jump in and get right into it academically. There was no first year where you can just like really figure things out and then do things the right way. No, it was just, you know, go for it. And so I felt very alienated as the only Black male student in a class of about 140 something students.
Wow.
I had, lucky for me, I found a couple elements within that class that you know, and Shanaz being one of them, a mature student just like me. So that, honestly, that group called ourselves the group of misfits. That group was responsible for a lot of just de-escalation or is responsible for a lot of things that could have gone, or responsible for just keeping me contained and preventing a lot of things from going really bad. And then I was living privately, so it was very much a situation where I would go home and then go to university, and it was two separate worlds. So already that as soon as the class would finish, I would be out. I wouldn't walk around. I wouldn't stay around. I didn't know what there was for a very long time. I didn't know what the library even looked like, because little microaggressions, like for example, stepping out, walk in. I say it's the phenomenon of being visibly invisible. It's like, I'm a big black guy with dreadlocks. You will see me. You will see me. You will obviously notice me, but everyone is acting like I don't exist. It got to a point that I developed these blinders, like horses do and during horse races. Like, I didn't look around because I was like, I don't want to bother looking around and seeing the looks and then the swift turns and all that. I didn't want to. So in many instances, I'd see a friend would be walking from far away, waving frantically, Yannick, and unless they actually say my name, I wouldn't hear anything. I wouldn't see them because I'm just focused on getting from point A to point B. Little things like, for example, I would walk and then people wouldn't hold the door open despite the fact that they see me. I know you see me, I'm behind you, but you wouldn't hold the door open. You would just walk through. So it was just a combination of that. And then to add on top of that, I had some issues with student finance, which they sort of didn't want to fund my year. So there was a very long time where I had to sort of self-fund the start of my second year. And the same thing happened in my third year. So on top of that, my experience was very much, there were also other structural things that made it that it was just very difficult. And then coming into university, of course, I came in with being diagnosed with depression and anxiety. So on top of that, it just makes for a very volatile cocktail. So, and that was my undergraduate. So I managed to emerge with my 2-1, miracle. I emerged with that, and I was really happy. I worked really hard on that. But then when that happened, something about wanting to go right, something about wanting to become a clinical psychologist and seeing the applied neuropsychology course and just knowing that I need to go for that, because it's 80% of the course is taught by actual clinical psychologists and clinical neuropsychologists and stuff. So it's a very good way to get that sort of experience and to sort of see what the profession really is about. So I jumped on that, but then I also decided to develop this initiative for Black students. It initially started with Black male students to sort of have a space to talk and to have a community where our shared experience, because I knew that I wasn't alone in my experience. I knew that a lot of what I went through was similar to what other people were going through. And I know that as social creatures, getting that cathartic release from just being in space with each other and to talk and to relate to each other, it's not the silver bullet type cure to a situation, but it is a good way to approach things from a very preventative standpoint. So I developed that, and then, slowly it became Black women. So called it Black Men Talk, and then Black Women Talk. Then we would have Black Men and Women Talk sessions where we'd bring everyone together and sort of like obviously celebrate the differences and then celebrate the similarities and sort of understand each other. And so yeah, we've been running for 2 academic years, and sort of evolved into Black People Talk now, which is sort of spreading over nationally or at universities all over the country. So I guess the silver lining in this entire situation is, yes, I'm not alone in my experience. The majority, if not all, Black students will experience this, especially if you're in a sort of like Russell Group, higher like type of elitist type of university. You will experience that. It just depends on, you will experience that, and then you'll experience that in many sort of settings. And but out of that, something came out that gave me that cathartic release and feel like I'm actually doing something for my community. So in a long-winded answer, this was my experience at university.
That's amazing. And on Twitter, people will be able to find Black People Talk.
Yes. I think
we tweet that to make sure that people can see it. It's important, isn't it? When somebody does something amazing, you should celebrate it. It's good for everybody. So I'm not sure if Bertha wants to talk about universities, but you talk about wherever you like. And we'll come to you for a bit, and then Vanessa's already getting some questions through. So
okay.
What do you think?
I think experiences of BME nursing students in practice, it's something that can be quite challenging. I think I will share my personal experience as a nursing student. So like Yannick and Shanaz, I also went to train as a mature student. First, I think the incident happened in one of my earlier placements. At university, we hadn't had much talk or discussion around some of the discrimination that we might come across out in practice. So I was at the placement, a white student, a nursing student as well from my university. We were good friends. She was late quite a lot to the placement. And then one day, a couple of weeks in, I was late for the first time because I had car problems. And when I walked into the handover, the nurse in charge then kind of really told me off about it in front of everybody. I felt really embarrassed, but the most thing I still remember up to this day is I felt really angry because I felt the injustice that my colleague who was late several times would just walk into handover, sit down, and it was never addressed like that. So after the handover, I went straight to the managers. I challenged it. The nurse was brought in. We had to talk about it. And I think as well, when I always reflect back on this, was it because I was a mature student, I had life experiences, I was able to challenge that. So I'm really passionate around encouraging students that when you are out in practice, I know in my organization, we wouldn't tolerate anything like that. When you are out in practice, you do not accept any behavior like that. If you feel you have been discriminated against, I know it can be difficult to talk about it, but you need to find somebody, find your mentor, talk to your mentor about it, or the ward manager if you're on a ward, or you can find somebody like myself within the organization. You always have senior nurses. Also, the moment you do go into placement, establish who are the BAME network people, usually a lot of, in my organization, and I know organizations I've worked in the past, they have locality BAME leaders as well who you can speak to, because it's something that you cannot do that. Even our nurses, we encourage them to speak. Our BAME nurses know that they can speak and challenge such behavior. And if you are brave enough to challenge it with the person, I always advise that, ask the person to speak to them in private, because sometimes people will show off if there's an audience and you don't want to have a back and forth happening with an audience. And then when you speak to them, just say to them, I feel the way you are treating me does not align with the values of the organization, because there is no organization that has values that allow discrimination. And you don't even have to say it doesn't align with your values or their values, because you don't know their values and they don't know your values. But definitely what you have in common with that person is that you have the same organizational values. So you need to say, I feel that it is not aligning with my values. And I think as well, another thing that does happen in practice a lot, unfortunately, to our student nurses is receiving discrimination as well from people who are on the wards, who are using the service, admitted on the wards. And that can be quite challenging as well to students. And one thing I just want to say to students, the way you feel is exactly the way experienced nurses feel as well. We are all humans. No one likes to be discriminated against. So it is within your right to actually go and talk about it. If you have been taught the skill of how you address it, but I would always advise that maybe it might not be the best to kind of address it with the person who's done that to you, but definitely don't keep it. Go and speak about it to your mentor, go and speak about it to the nurse in charge. because it's not acceptable, and also dependent on how unwell the person is, staff will go and have conversations with the person around how that is not acceptable. Because I think sometimes there's this blanket thing that people who are in hospital, all people in hospital can say whatever they want because they are unwell, and it's not about that. So even nurses, we encourage our experienced nurses that when they do receive any discrimination as well from people we are looking after, they need to speak about it. They need to address it in supervision, speak about it, have some peer supervision, and also complete even incident forms. Of course, we also, the way we will address it with the person depends on, it will be on an individual, because it obviously depends on how unwell somebody is. But it's something that it's never acceptable, no matter who it is coming from, and you don't need to take it and listen to it. And also, sorry, I hope I'm not going.
Go for it.
I'm known for that. And also, it's not even about you receiving that discrimination. Sometimes students, especially with, I know with Black Lives Matters, it kind of really brought to the forefront what has been existing for kind of some of the discrimination that happens out in practice. And I know some students, I joined a call of people who support students in practice, and I heard how some students were saying they do notice, they observe things happening in practice against BAME nurses, and it affects them, it makes them feel uncomfortable, and they start to think, even if it's not being directed to them, they start to think that could be me, and it's not right. And I always say, you should always maintain your values. If you feel that something is not right, it most probably isn't. If you feel that you have to question that, is the way that person is being treated right, it usually is, most probably it isn't. So also call it out, address it, go and speak to somebody if you're not able to address it to the person who you've observed doing that. But don't allow things like that. Never kind of always live your values. If you see something that is not right, it is within your right to call it out. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's toxic, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, we don't encourage people to handle toxic materials without reporting it. We don't ask you to lift up heavy objects without, having manual handling training, because this is a safeguarding issue. It's to do with your emotional safety and the well-being and the ability for everyone around you to thrive. And if we don't have that, none of us have that. Do you know what I mean? And I think you're absolutely right to say how frightening it must be for a student nurse or a junior member of staff to see this and think, if it can happen to this person who's all the way up here, I'll never get to a position where I will be safe from it. And that's horrifying.
Yeah.
Just absolutely horrifying. And the other thing I always find really weird about when you're thinking about reporting, I've come across lots of students who haven't wanted to report because they've been embarrassed. Yeah. And I think exactly as Bertha says, don't you carry somebody else's shame. If somebody is racist, that's their problem. Exactly. That's on them. They should be the person who's embarrassed. And I think sometimes with instant forms, you have to write stuff down and it can feel like it sticks to you. Nobody who reads that form will think that.
No.
Please be reassured. I think we've got some questions come in as well, Vanessa.
Yeah, we have. We've got a question from Alfonso that I think Bertha's answered, really, but I was going to see if anyone else wanted to add anything. So just to reiterate it, really, it's what advice would you give to students who might deal with difficult situations where a member of the public is being racist? So that's the first question. If there's any more comments on that, and shall I read the second one as well? The second one from Adrian is, why do you think there has been such a slow healthcare response to supporting ethnic equity, both in healthcare professionals and patient care outcomes? Which is something I must admit I've been thinking about recently myself. So, so two very different questions, really. And I'll throw that open to whoever wants to answer them.
Well, if I can chime in first, it's something I really reflected on when COVID happened, and actually links into kind of your protest question, I think, to some degree, because when it first hit the news, the inequities in COVID, as a trained person in the human sciences, I was like, we already know this. It's already in the data. It's in so many different datas, you know, and then I realized, oh, wow, you've become that desensitized, because me and all of my friends were having this conversation in this kind of laissez-faire way. And then I facilitated a wobble room with our students who were either nationally deployed in their final year or whatever, BME students. And I heard their stories, and I frankly felt ashamed by how complacent I had been as a person of colour who knows that data. And I think systemically we had become that complacent. This data was out there. We knew it. It's in various different factions of health. And protesting has made people realise that we actually need to get ahead of this, and we need strategies. We need to stop just accepting it and collecting data about it and saying this is out there. So to clarify, a wobble room is a space that we created virtually in this instance for the students to come once a week for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and really just offload. It was just a safe space for BME students who were in practice in health sciences to come and share anything, whether it was that they wanted to laugh, whether they were talking about being fearful of bringing COVID back to their children, whether it was about that they'd lost people, whether it was about how they were using meditation apps to cope with being on shift and in their breaks and the fear. And so, yeah, I think for me, it really hit home. If I, as a person of colour who has a degree in psychology, has chosen to do something in inclusive design, clearly my career trajectory has been influenced by my need to address these problems because of what I faced. If even I was complacent and desensitized to it, then I can certainly see systemically how we are. And in terms of the practical implications in practice, I'll leave that to Yannick and to Bertha to talk about, because you're on the wards. So I definitely want to hear your experiences and what you think.
Yeah, Yannick, go first or I go first? I think the first question on from members of the public, obviously can't advise on outside the clinical area, but inside the clinical area, if it is a visitor, you would expect to deal with it the way we would expect to deal with any discrimination from somebody who's admitted on the ward. And I've explained that, but I'm quite happy to, Adrian, if you need further information about that, to contact outside of the session. The second question, why it's taken so long, I think that's kind of the $1 million question, really. And like what Shanaz says, that I think sometimes, a lot of times society becomes desensitized to the reality. So I said I've been a nurse for 14 years. So 10 years, I was mostly, 3 years was inpatient mental health acute wards, and then 6 years was in crisis teams. And I worked around a lot of BME nurses, a lot of BME practitioners in crisis team as well. I never thought about the inequality in leadership at all. Obviously, you have those talks that, oh, there's a job out, in applying for it, you won't get it. So I became a senior nurse 4 years ago. And I remember when it really struck me how this is so apparent. I had to go for a meeting for my manager, which she couldn't attend in London. And when I turned up in the room, it struck me how in a room full of people, there was no one else who looked like me. And suddenly hit me just how much this inequality exists within the leadership of the NHS. And it's something that I'm quite passionate about. And I think I've had a different experience because I think I've been lucky to work in organizations where they are very supportive around that. But still within my extended networks, I've heard stories of how you have a brilliant Band 5 nurse who's passionate, enthusiastic, excellent at their job. They get a white student nurse, they mentor them, the student nurse qualifies, they become the preceptor for that student nurse. The student nurse, a deputy ward manager post comes on the ward, for it. The student nurse, her former student nurse who's now just finished their preceptorship goes for the job, and they get the job and they become their manager. Following year, same cycle. And after a period of time, they stop applying for the jobs. You know, they just think, why should I do that? And this is not something that I've heard from one or two people, but it seems to be a very, a similar story all over. And in terms of addressing it, I know that there's been honest and, genuine appetite to address this for years now. I know in 2015, NHS England established the workforce race equality standards, and in the past 5 years, yes, there has been some improvements for the outcomes of BME staff in terms of the recruitment process, the disciplinary process, where they were always overrepresented. But still, there is so much that still needs to do. And I really, optimist in me, really believes that with all Black Lives Matter protest, this time there seems to be a real kind of, it's not about doing more inquiries. It's not about producing more data. We know the data. You just have to work on to most mental health acute wards, and the staff representation tells you what the situation is about. I think now a lot of organizations are really committed to turn all the statistics, all the recommendations from the numerous inquiries into action. I think the real thing now is about there needs to be action, not inquiries after inquiries and reports and recommendations, but there need to be actions. And I know I can speak for my organization that we are really we are fortunate to have a leadership that is kind and compassionate and genuinely wants to see change. So we are putting actions in place, and I know other organizations are too. So things like ensuring there's the HR processes are equal to people from all backgrounds to achieve, putting mentorship in place, having reverse mentorship, because that's quite a popular one, where you have somebody, a BME staff from maybe a lower banding, mentoring a senior leader, so that the senior leaders can really understand the experience of the BME person, and also having kind of a leadership that is really culturally aware. Because an example I can give you, when I was interviewing for kind of senior nurse leadership role, is that in my culture, when you do something, when you do a project, you don't say, I did this successful project. You say, we did this project. And in Africa, we call it the spirit of umundu. So in going in interviews, if I'm asked, tell us about a project that you did and it was successful, tell us, what process you went through. I would say, we did this. And they're like, we, you and who? I'll say me and my team. And they're like, no, tell us what you did. But then because of my culture, I believe that. And sometimes I believe that I don't have to change my values to fit into what things. So I can explain that, okay, I might have led this project, but for it to be successful is because I had the support of an amazing team. So it's things like that sometimes when BME staff are in an interview, although people the panel needs to be aware that cultural differences can make a big difference. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of organizations are using psychometric testing for higher banding jobs. But when you think about some of the questions in those psychometric tests, they're not culturally religiously sensitive. I remember one job interview I went to senior leadership post when the psychologist was giving me feedback, and she was saying your answers were kind of confusing because they were like totally the opposite, you know? And then I said, but some of them were informed by my religion. So a question asking me, do you believe you have control of your future? Because my religion, I'm Christian, I don't believe I have control of my future. I believe God has control of my future. So I would say no, I totally don't have control. But then for someone else who might not have the same religion with me, all have, but then it doesn't mean they are a better leader than me. We are both equally, but we're just coming from a different place. So I think it's about that. It's about really ensuring that those interview processes are also kind of culturally, religiously, and, you know, inclusive of everybody. And also I know some organizations are now, as part of the action that a lot of organizations are putting in place now, is also kind of really recognizing the importance of BME stories, even at board level, because a lot of boards have like a person's story for their board meetings. And I understand some organizations now, they also have a BME person come and tell their story and experience of racism. So I don't know whether I'm just a terrible optimist, but I really believe that this time things will speed up more than they have been happening in the past. Yeah, I don't know.
It's really positive. I'm pleased you feel that. Yeah. Vanessa, is there another question coming?
Yeah, there's a question here on making the nursing curriculum more inclusive and looking at the experiences of BAME students. The question is, what would you say to academics and teachers about how best they can make their teaching more inclusive and create safe spaces for BME students? So I know we've covered quite a few things there already, and particularly like I'm thinking about the wobble rooms that you talked about as well. Is there anything else that you want to...
Yeah, so there's loads. I mean, Bertha's tipped her hat to a lot of them, so thank you, Bertha. Most universities have at the very highest level some form of strategic priority in terms of creating a more inclusive curriculum, bridging some of the attainment gaps, and generally creating a more inclusive environment. In Nottingham, we're calling that effort regularising ethnic presence in the curriculum. And that's going on at school level, really, and each programme level locally. And we consult with students. We're trying to co-design with students. So as Bertha said, really, get involved. Now is a great time in terms of the synergy and people supporting you. And in my first university, back when I was a student like you guys in undergrad, I was involved with my widening participation teams. I threw myself into that kind of work to overcome the problems as I saw them. I was like, if I feel like I can make a difference, then I can kind of stick it out. And now I still do that. My master's is informed by that. And like what Bertha said, like, she touched on a lot of things that are informed by psychological theory. So it's known in the literature that there's a difference in talkativity between different cultures, for example. The consideration of the interdependent self versus the independent self. In terms of, like what Bertha was saying, people that identify more as an individual versus those that identify as a group. And again, when we look at pedagogy, so what that is like the theory and approach to teaching and learning, which informs a lot of how your curriculums are designed, whether you guys know it or not. We are thinking about inclusivity in that. So one way in which we do that is via encouraging maybe assessment activities where students share stories so they can bring themselves to the curriculum. Things like active learning. So you go out and you seek information that resonates with you, that's important to you to satisfy the competencies in the curriculum. More collaborative learning. So it's less about somewhat kind of democratizing the classroom in a way. It's less about someone standing there as the expert that you don't challenge, that's got a million publications. Rather, it's about yes, you guys starting from an evidence base and then discussing it and talking about your experiences and how you feel it applies, and bringing your different insights as a person and also culturally as well. So there's a lot of work being done at all types, all universities, looking at creating more inclusive curriculums, dismantling aspects like, the interaction with the class system and genderism. It's broader than just race. And so what I would say to you guys is keep an eye out with what's going on at your institutions. Work with people. One of our problems is that when we want student feedback, is trying to get you guys to stop having fun or being so busy with your course that you'll come and talk to us. So look for those opportunities and work with us, because we've always got time to listen and get your vantage point.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Yeah. One of the things for me, what we haven't covered, although I think Yannick kind of hinted at it earlier, was about intersectionality. And Nicky knows I always like to kind of throw this in, having worked in prisons, because for me, there's often like a blanket response based on ethnicity and race, which is totally inappropriate. So, like, for example, having worked in female prisons, where there's practice that's brought in that's supposedly quite informed, but it's very much geared towards male prisoners rather than female prisoners. And I guess like we were talking, there's all sorts of other factors like class, disability. So how do we make how do we help people have that kind of wider appreciation, really? Because I think for me it is quite important, and although we're talking much more about race and ethnicity, I don't think we're talking enough about things like whether you're working class, whether you've got a disability, and how all those things interact together. So I'm not sure it's a question, but just something that I wanted to throw in there at the end, really.
I agree totally, and I think that I'm biased because I come from a certain background in terms of human factors, but for me it's all about participatory designing of systems, designing of resources, products, and that sort of thing. We're doing a lot of work at my university where we are just talking to each other. We're doing it with staff and with students, because like what you're saying, one thing that as a person of colour I've really got no time for is a superficial appreciation of culture or race for me. I'll use Yannick as an example because I know him personally. We're both Black, yes. I'm mixed race for a start. We also descend from different origins. I'm of Caribbean descent. He's of African descent. There's very different cultures, very different worldviews, very different histories. So you need to listen to the stories of people and the detail. And I think that's an important first step, really, is when you're dealing with inclusivity of any sort, listen first. As a person who comes from an inclusive design background, my focus is disability, it's aging, it's all inclusion across all the metrics. And for the groups that I'm not a part of, that's where I start from, a place of listening, both in terms of how I capture data and in terms of how I deal with people.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
So, hearing all of these and even all the questions, there were so many instances that I definitely wanted to jump in and respond, but then obviously Bertha and Shanaz are much better placed in terms of, the more of the policy creating side of things, or the policy shifting side of things. But I think from an academic standpoint, I think there's this, like, I agree with you very much, Vanessa. Like, there's this whole thing where it's a very blanketed, when you think about it, ethnic minorities and just, it's a whole blanketed thing where it's just like, it's a whole bunch of them. It's the others. And so just them all one, and their experiences are very much individual and very separate. I think it's a thing where academically, investigations and research on this particular topic, when it comes to disaggregating just like these identities, and instead of bunching them together into one, disaggregating, i.e. just like keeping them separate, I think it needs to change in the sense of these pieces of research are not held up to the same standard or value as the others that are looking at the typical norm, whether it's you're investigating just the student experience at university. You say students, you look at all students. Like, that is obviously a very top-down approach to looking at the issue. And whoever in this world builds a pyramid from the top to the bottom, that makes absolutely no sense. So when it comes to these things, disaggregating these studies and looking at things individual, look at Black men, if you have the opportunity to look at Black men of Caribbean descent, of African descent, because those are different things. Look at Asian men from a particular area and Asian men from another particular area. And then once you have all these collections of studies, then build on top of that, work on the similarities you found from one group into another. And then that's slowly how you build a pyramid that it has a very bottom-up approach in terms of, and that really informs policy. Like I remember in my undergraduate, my dissertation was identifying the psychological effects of limbo on African economic immigrants. So essentially, when you come as an African when you emigrate here to the UK and you're trying to regularize your status, your legal status, sometimes when you make your application to the Home Office, you can be in this position where you are made to wait. So you're in this limbo period where you can't vote, you can't go to school, you can't do this, you can't do that, you just have to wait. Now, some people it happens for 2 years, 1 year, 6 months. Some people it happens for 10. So what happens in between then? You come as an economic immigrant. I'm not saying asylum seeker or refugee. You come in as an economic immigrant and you think, okay, I want to, I'm here. I want to do this. I'm ambitious. I want to do this and this and this, but you're stuck. You have a ceiling, a very thick glass ceiling. So you do none of that. So I was investigating the psychological effects of things that come about, the learned helplessness, the all of these various things. But I picked a specific one. And then obviously I will revisit this undergraduate piece, and I will, at a later stage in my career, I will actually do a study around that, and maybe do a collection of studies where it's like we can start this, because I feel like this whole idea, this whole immigration process and the psychological effects that it has on people is not necessarily investigated, and there's no literature around it. I found nothing. It was so hard to find stuff around that. But the psychological effects on people, like you keep someone in a cage for such a long time, and then you release them into the world, and then they never quite live up to that potential that they would have lived up to, or it takes a very long time before they go through that. And obviously it comes from a personal story, because I myself sort of went through that. It's the main reason why I accessed university at a mature student level. So yeah, so that's what I did. So studies like that, I feel like at an academic stage, I remember asking my supervisor, do you think I could get a first with this? Now that already is telling of the fact that I know inherently that people will not take this seriously, and that potentially I am telling this particular story to someone that may not necessarily understand it. And this happens, I'm pretty sure. It's funny, but all of these contexts in which we operate, like Shanaz and Bertha, all of these contexts that we operate in are all just microcosms or reflections of each other. I remember, if I put that story to the side, when I first started my Black Men Talk initiative, I submitted it to this thing. It was like an outstanding award type thing. So they basically award students for creating social action campaigns. And obviously, you do the stuff, you write a really good piece and all that. I got a distinction for the piece I wrote that talked about my initiative. And then it came to the interview process, where you have to be interviewed by 3 people, one person from the particular industry that you your social campaign is within, and then 2 of the careers officers. Now, when I walked into the room, I was presented with a white man in the middle and and 2 white women on the side. So already, as someone that is going into a situation and is going to talk about how the university is not necessarily can be somewhat of an oppressive environment for a student like me, I am going to dampen what I say. I'm not going to say what I say with my chest. And this reflects what Bertha was saying, in the sense of, I'm not going to present the most confident self that I am. I'm going to talk. I'm going to lower my voice. My voice is not going to be high in octaves. I'm not going to be as assertive as I would have wanted to be. Now, lucky for me, 2 of the people on that panel understood that. Well, I'm assuming they did, because they marked me distinction for my interview process. But one person decided to, one person didn't necessarily understand that, And so they marked me down because I was hesitant, because I wasn't necessarily I wasn't bringing my words out the right way. I was sort of all over the place, but understandable. You are a Black man talking to university officials about how the university is failing you and all the other students, and why what you have provided has been successful. And so the result of it was I missed out on a distinction and the award. I ended up having just a pass, because whereas some people marked me, 2 people marked me 25, the other person marked me 13, which significantly just brought that down. Now, I decided I wanted to pursue that, but I didn't in the end, because I was like, I just don't want to create ripples on this pond. Let me just get my degree and get out of there. But this is an example of it. It's the same, and this echoes what happens as a HCA. Obviously, I work in a mental health hospital, and I always see agency nurses, and a lot of the agency nurses are always Black. They are, and I asked myself, and then I was having a conversation with a fellow worker, and they were like, sometimes these nurses, they come and you can tell that they don't really care. And in my mind, I said to myself, why in the world would you care when you come with all the hopes to go up and to rise, but there is a ceiling? So then what are you going to do? You're going to become an agency worker where the money is good, and you're going to focus on the money because there's no progression. And even if you progress, you're not going anywhere. So if there's no progression, you care less. So then you work as agency job, or you prefer to take night shifts. I've been working a lot of night shift recently, and I know that obviously you get paid a whole lot more. I've noticed the population of Black HCA and Black nurses on night shift is significantly higher than during the day. It's literally just deciding to, I'm just going to go for the money because I know that I'm not valued. So let me at least get something good out of this, which is the money. And that is very telling of the system. It happened in my university, and it happened in the NHS and stuff. And this is very telling of the environment. And I guess that's what I wanted to add.
It makes sense of decisions, doesn't it? These things are not accidental.
Not at all.
If you keep not rewarding or being punitive, then people make different choices.
Yeah.
Well, why is everyone surprised? Yeah.
Like none of what has happened surprises me. None of the, even, sorry, I don't mean to keep going on, but even the thing of why are people dragging their feet in terms of changing things within the whether it's the health services and all of that. Well, it's because, and then I'll be fully honest, in my opinion, it's not the whole reason, but one of the reasons is because there is an element of denial of what the true situation is. The UK for the very longest time has been, it's been the place that has been considered as the most accepting place in for ethnic minorities and stuff like that. And this is that whole idea of if it's not overt racism, then it doesn't exist. The systemic racism is being completely ignored. It doesn't exist because we're not, having pitchforks and throwing stuff at people. Because that doesn't exist, that's one of the reasons why. Whereas we obviously know that because of the way systemic racism is set up, this is going. None of it surprised me, and it's sad that it didn't surprise me at all. None of it surprises me. I mean, even think about the fact that I was a little bit afraid that someone was going to ask me, "What do you think of the Black Lives Matter movement?" Or someone was going to ask a question like that, and I would have to say, I stand behind it 103% with a 3% margin of error. I stand behind it and the fact that you would ask me what I think about it tells me that you don't actually understand what the true intent of this movement is. Therefore, it's a waste of cognitive and emotional, just like reserve for me to even argue with you. So then there's that. The next thing is the UK. I don't know what the reality is for now, but the UK was one of the first countries to have counter protest marches against the Black Lives Matter thing, protests. I don't know if it was, I don't know. Don't quote me fully on it. I'm not sure, but I know that there were counter protests. So obviously there is something here that we are just, looking and asking questions. Why are we asking questions when it's a thing of just, what? I think I'm good.
Well, Yannick, I think that I'm going to not challenge you a little bit here, but I'm going to I'm going to bring in, I suppose, a little bit to answer Vanessa's question and also the student's question. And this is definitely informed by the fact that I come from, the fields of psychology. And in evolutionary psychology, we conceptualize that the behavior, the social cognition that bias and stereotyping and discrimination and racism bootstraps onto as kind of in-group, out-group biases, and it's argued that it harks back to kind of tribalism and things like that. So taking what you know or you've been taught about psychological universalisms, you can understand how it's logical that the other group is going to feel the need.
I fully agree with you, and this is.
I'm not saying it's okay.
I fully agree. I fully agree with you, and do not mistake my enthusiasm for misunderstanding what the situation is. This is something I walk around saying all the time. I love evolutionary psychology, and I do understand that racism is just categorization on steroids. Essentially, if a pigeon sees an animal with sharp canines and claws, I think it's safe to say that this thing will eat me because it's a carnivore. Therefore, I will fly. And it looks different to me. If you happen, that at a very, very just like basic, that's exactly how humans are. It's really difficult to look at someone and be like, I'm going to judge you individually. I'm not going to go off of any stereotypes. Stereotyping is literally just because it takes too much cognitive reserve for us to like look at someone individual. Oh no, the trousers are this inch high from the this or that or whatever. Make these quick assumptions, and that's normal. That's categorization. That's a normal evolutionary thing. So I understand that. But at the same time, it doesn't negate the fact that this process, the systematic racism, is having an unfair effect on people like me. So because of that, whereas I accept and I know where it comes from, it's important to, once you know where a problem comes from, it's very easy. It's a lot easier to sort of stomach it and to think about a way to solve it or to reroute.
And to reduce it as well, not to allow it to hurt you. I find it psychologically protective to know that. And I know you know this, Yannick. I'm not coming for you. It's just we've got students potentially listening who are from a different academic tradition that don't necessarily know the psychological mechanisms the way that we do, or that the literature suggests that they are. And I don't want them to feel any sense of sort of hopelessness, And also, in this broader inclusivity discussion, I know we're talking about Black Lives Matter now, but in the climate at the moment, there is a broader inclusivity discussion. And I'm not talking about all life matters. I mean, how do we make life more inclusive for people of all different classes, for disabled people and this sort of thing, that broader inclusivity conversation. It's important for us to all know that we all psychologically can have the propensity to band to our in-group and to exclude the out-group.
Of course.
Yeah, I suppose you're making a really interesting point in the fact that it's an automatic, natural experience for human beings to do this, but we're also supposed to be more than our automatic human responses, And I think,
and the first thing is knowing it.
Yeah. What I'm always more amazed at is that people seem to be much more okay with being racist than cool. When they get called racist, they're really offended, and that's what I find really interesting about this kind of like legacy of pain, is that it's easy to ignore other people's pain, but when your own pain is brought in front of you, it's really upsetting. Like, well, maybe you could use your empathy to push that out and maybe include other people in that experience. It's a really challenging experience, I think, and I'm so glad that everyone has been just so open and just talking about this stuff, because I think it's really important for people to know this is part of health and well-being. Racism impacts everybody. There is nobody who comes out of a racist system okay. There are people who do better, as Yannick rightly said, but nobody is okay in the system. It's not healthy, and it's not good for anybody for this system to continue. And I think nurses see it really clearly. Mental health nurses see the impact of racism on their colleagues and on service users and in their societies. And, you have a place and a mandate to say that stuff. And I think students are part of institutions, aren't they? Part of health systems and university systems. And what you guys are all doing, which is so, so amazing, is showing people there are things that you can do about this. You don't just have to sit there feeling like this. And I suppose we're going to get ready for finishing thoughts now and sort of go around. And I appreciate it. Now everyone's asking these great big questions. Everyone's like, my finishing thoughts got to be amazing. Don't be pressured. If there's anything, just a message you want to give out to people who are watching, just talking about mental health, well-being, students, this whole range of discussion we're having, we'll whip round everybody and then finish up, because this is one of the longest times I've ever talked, and it has whizzed by. And I wouldn't want people to think this is the only time we're ever going to talk about these issues, because these issues impact everybody all the time. So, don't feel that everything has to be said right now. We can circle back. We can focus in on different issues. It's really not a problem. We've got a lot of flexibility. So can I come around, maybe start with Bertha, and then Vanessa, then Shanaz and Yannick? So Bertha, last thoughts. Makes it sound like I'm going to shoot everybody now, doesn't it? Last thoughts, like final words, like anything you want to just bring to the fore.
Yeah, I think for me, my final words to BME nursing students out there is definitely don't sit. You need to talk, because you need to be a part of this change that it definitely needs to happen. Many organizations, mine included, are really acting on this, but we need every organization acting on this. So we need your bright ideas of how we can speed up the action as well. So your voice matters. It really matters. Give us your ideas. I'm on Twitter. You can send me even a private message if you've got any ideas or you'd love to come and visit our organization. And I think I don't know, I think it might be unfortunate we might not have very senior NHS leadership listening to this, but if anyone knows somebody, please do take the message to them that we need action, because we don't want our passionate young students coming into organizations and not seeing people who look like them in leadership. For them to aspire to also get to that, they need to see that it can happen for them. And it really, I work with a lot of newly qualified nurses. I teach on the preceptorship program. And when students come in, I find all the students, no matter what race they are equally passionate, ambitious, enthusiastic, competent, equally skilled. So why does it change when the preceptorship finishes? Why does it change that in some places people move up quickly and they stay static where they are? So yes, I'm challenging every senior NHS leader in the country to really, I know you all have this appetite to make change within your organization. So I'm saying, yes, please do, and please act. And for the students, things will change. Your stories will be different from my stories and those before me. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm about to storm a barricade then. You're supposed to be doing something, Nicky. Can we come to Vanessa? Just say before we head out.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much I could say, really, listening to everyone. And I think that, I need to reflect. But for me, I think similar to what I said when we ended the LGBT event, and that's, the colour of my skin's white, and I'm very aware of that. But I'm also a woman. And as a woman, I've been in situations where I've clearly been discriminated against. And I've always been someone that when there's been a women's party in the NHS, I've always said that we need men in the room as well, because we need male allies. And I'd say the same, that we need to use sort of our white privilege as well. We need to, as Nicky said, have empathy. We need to be aware of structural racism, because I think most people will say that they're not racist. And a lot of racism is, about ignorance. It's about not being culturally sensitive. And again, I've talked about prisons, but that's an area where, you do see it a lot, where it's not so much, it's very, very subtle. So I guess my message is really about, being aware of our own privilege, being allies, using our empathy skills, but also designing for inclusion, as we've talked about. So always starting with people's stories, rather than making assumptions about what we think and then asking people once we've designed services or courses what they think, just so we can tick a box. Because I'm going to be honest, I think that still goes on quite a lot, and and it needs to change. And people talk about co-production, but often, it is still just a word. So we need to really mean it when we're talking about it. I could say a lot more, but I'm going to end there. But it's been a fascinating discussion, and I feel like I've learned so much, and there's a lot for me to take away and reflect on as well.
Yannick?
This is a hard one.
You can refer us to your previous points if you prefer.
No, things are, I would say, just take care of yourself. Take care of yourselves. At this point, with everything that's going on, self-care is an act of radicalization. It's radical to care for yourself. If you're just like Bertha said, when you're entering any sort of institution, just seek oases, places, safe spaces you could go, safe spaces you could and I'm mainly speaking to BME, any students, just seek those spaces actively, as in you can come in, and yes, you're very excited about the fact that you it's new, you have a new course, and you're there. Seek places like the Wobble Room that Shanaz is heading up. I think seek places like this. Seek places where you can be safe to be brave, because safe spaces, there's no such thing as a safe space. It's spaces where you're safe to be brave, because it's a very brave thing to sort of bring your experience, bring your talk about the things that you go through and share personal things like that. So seek those spaces in order to ensure that you are able to achieve all the things that you want to achieve while you venture on whatever journey you are actually on and where you're heading to. So I would say that take care of yourself. So to keep that in mind, that you have to make it, basically. So anything you need to do in order to make it, in terms of like taking care of yourself and being careful, those are the things you need to do.
Good advice there. Absolutely. And lastly, Shanaz?
Well, I would like to say that, first of all, Toni Morrison said racism is a distraction, guys. Don't allow yourself to be distracted. We're working so hard to create spaces where you can bring your full self to what you're doing, both in placement, both at university and all of the rest of it. Like what Vanessa said, I gave a talk the other day at our internal conference around service design and how we can make that more authentic and more effective. So there are people pushing boundaries for you. And I feel like a lot of chats like this around kind of the BME experience can get kind of like, oh, all of the things that are wrong. And it's not to negate the fact that we have a lot of challenges, but guys, always remember, our cultures are beautiful. My culture is beautiful. I love it. My perception of the Black experience is beautiful. And remember, you are so loved, considering the barriers that we have as communities and sometimes as countries, for you to be where you are at university, in the NHS, where there's fabulous people like Bertha, thank you, who have paved the way for us. Some in academia too. I'm making a point at the moment every time I meet admirable Black people in organisations to say thank you. Thank you guys for what you've enjoyed and how you've created the space for us guys. And there's loads of us, people like me and Yannick, we're coming for those leadership positions too. We want doctorates so that when you come to university, you see yourselves in front of you teaching as well. And you guys can do that too. So just remember, keep pushing.
Absolutely. And on that note, no one's going to top that, are they? Let's just finish. But thank you so much. What an amazing panel. You're so generous. Really, really appreciate that. I know that your time and your experience are extremely valuable and hard-won things. So thank you very much for sharing them with us. Appreciate that. That's it for us tonight. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.